outage issues here, and so due to that issue, we're intermittently losing power, which means we're intermittently losing internet connection. So we're trying to fight through that. So we're going to get the webinar started here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to plan on starting at 5 after. I got to go check one more thing to see if we can keep this up and running. We're going to try to get through this webinar today, but like I said, with the power and internet being intermittent, we may have some problems. So if you'll just hold tight for 4 minutes, I'm going to go try to square away a couple more things and see if we can get this going, and see if we can get through this webinar without an issue. So if y'all can just hold tight for 4 more minutes, let me go see if I can prepare to get this where we can try to have a smooth process. Again, sorry for the inconvenience, but not much we can do about power outages. So just bear with me, and I will be right back. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for waiting patiently. So again, my name is Scott Meek, and I'm a trainer here at Diesel Laptops. Today we're going to be going over the Detroit Diagnostic Link software. Now, those of you who were here a second ago, we're having some intermittent power loss issues here at the building today. It's not a building issue, it's a power grid issue. So everybody on our block is basically having power outages. We've had it go out multiple times every hour since I've been here, since about 7 o'clock this morning. So the chance that we get through this without a power outage is going to be slim, but we're going to try. And so I'm probably going to move a little bit faster than I typically do. If you know, we run into any issues, then we will reschedule, or we will just send you a recording of a previously recorded version, or we'll schedule for the next one. We'll figure it all out. We'll get it all taken care of. But in the meantime, let's try to get through this webinar and just try to get you familiar with Detroit Diagnostic Link 8. Now, some other things with Detroit Diagnostic Link 8. The goal today is to just get you familiar with the functionality and where different things are located and how to access certain information. You all are on mute, so if you have any questions, you can still communicate with me. Up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen will be a little orange arrow. If you click that arrow and expand that little box, there will be a little gray bar that says questions. So if you expand that box and you click that questions box, when you click the questions box, it gives you a spot to type in a question, and then you can just send that question over to me, and then I will read that question out loud, and I'll answer that question to the best of my ability. We keep everybody on mute because the background noise is basically always too much, and then interruptions and things like that. So we just keep everybody on mute, but again, that doesn't mean that you can't communicate with me. You absolutely can. So if you have any questions, just send them through on that chat function. So the software we're going to be dealing with today is going to be Detroit Diagnostic Link 8. The icon on your screen should look exactly like you see here, currently highlighted. Once we open up that software or that program icon there, it's going to take us to the default screen. Now, when we come here, if this is the first time you've ever opened up your Detroit software, or if you've ever lost communication device settings for whatever reason, the first thing that we would need to do is we would need to select the correct communication device. Now, if you have a Nexic or a DrewLink or a Cummins Inline or whatever connection device you use, you will have to go to that manufacturer's website and download the drivers for that specific device. Now, if you bought the computer from us, those drivers will already be loaded onto your computer. So once you've downloaded those drivers, or again, if you've purchased the computer from us and those drivers are already there, we'll just have to go up and we'll go to Tools. So we'll go to the tool icon up here, and then we'll go to Options. Now, once we go to Tools and we go to Options, the next place that we would have to go to set up our communication link for the first time would be this Connection tab located right here. Now, this Connection tab is where you're going to go if you ever have to add a new device or if you need to reconfigure for whatever reason. Now, typically your hardware is going to already be automatically selected to A plus J plus Y. That's the one that you're going to want to use. And then to change your translator device, you'll click SID Configure. So really the only thing you need to do is click SID Configure. And then once you click that, you'll choose the link that you have and how you're using that link. So in other words, I'm using a USB link. I'm using a USB link 2, and I'm using that through USB connection. So I'll select that connection, and then I will click OK. Now, once I do that, all I have to do now is make sure that all of my proprietary devices are able to automatically connect. So I want to make sure that I enable automatic connection of SAE 1939-1708, and I also have check marks beside all of these boxes here. Now, the reason we want to do that is, number one, the enable automatic connection. What's going to happen is once we set this up, from here on out, once we open the software up, it will automatically connect to the vehicle. So that's kind of a nice feature to have in my opinion. We don't want to restrict 1708, 1939 connections to powertrains only. You certainly can, and that will remove the UDS. And the UDS, I'll explain that here shortly. You don't use that too much, but it's there, so I don't ever click this. I leave that unselected. And then, of course, you want to make sure that we select all of these modules, because basically what this means is these are all the modules that this software could connect to. So we want to make sure that it has the option to automatically connect to all of those modules so we don't have to go hunting for a connection. So once we've chosen our selector type, our translator device, we've enabled automatic connection, and all of these boxes are selected, we will click Apply. And then once we click Apply, we will click OK. And we just had a power surge, so just bear with me. Let this get a chance to reconnect. It's going to be a little tough getting through this one today, but we'll make it. There we go. Okay. Now, once we actually get connected to the vehicle, it will automatically connect from here on out if you chose the settings that we just chose. And then if for some reason it doesn't automatically connect, all we need to do is come up here to File and then click Connect. Now, we shouldn't have to do that because it should automatically connect once we turn the key switch on and we connect our software. But if for some reason it doesn't, you'll just open up the file up here and then click Connect, and that will force it to connect. It will connect manually. Now, the very first page that we have here, this is the identification page. This is kind of the default screen, basically. And so let's kind of start with these items over here on the left. So from the top down, all of these little icons right here, this is going to be how we quickly navigate through the software. These are going to be the big ticket items that you're going to use when troubleshooting. So we have our faults codes tab, we have our troubleshooting tab, instrumentation, service routines, input-output controls, parameters, and how you program your modules. Below that is going to be your connection tab. And so what the connections tab does, it shows you every single module that is communicating. All right, so if we look here, we'll see we have the connections. And then we have our CPC is communicating, our MCM, our SAM, our gateway, our modular switch field, our after treatment control module, and our SAM chassis. Now all of these modules here are going to be directly related to things that we have access to in terms of this. If this upper box here, these are really dark colored. They're very easily shown, right? So they're not grayed out, as I call it. This means we have a lot of functionality within these modules. That means we can check codes, we can clear codes, we can do some troubleshooting, we can do some programming. But as we scroll down here, notice that none of these are dark like that. They're all grayed out. That's because these modules right here, we don't have much access to. We can see fault codes, but that's about as far as we can go. Okay, so basically if you think about it like this, the brakes, that has its own software dedicated to ABS. And then your engine number 1, that's going to be 1708, so it's a different bus. You've got your HVAC for your vehicle, you've got your forward radar. All these are Freightliner specific modules here, or Bidnix or WABCO. But these modules up here, we have a little more control over these. We can see a little bit more information about them. Now the 3 modules that we can do full troubleshooting with are going to be the CPC, the MCM, and the ACM. The rest of these we can see some basic information and do a little bit of input and output control. But again, the ones down here, we have to use different software, or we have to have a dealer level login. Now what that means is this: Detroit Diagnostic Link can work with, say, Freightliner cab controls or Freightliner HVAC, but the problem is you have to have a dealer Freightliner login to access that functionality. So even though you have the pro version of Detroit Diagnostic Link, you're still limited to not having full functionality here because you don't work for a Freightliner dealer, and that's the only way to access that. That can't be purchased. You have to work for a dealer to have access to the Freightliner specific information. And again, we can do whatever we need to do with the CPC, the MCM, and the ACM, because that is a Detroit specific set of modules. All right, so over here, once we see what modules are connected and which ones we have major functionality over, the first tab that we have here, our common tab, this is going to show us our UDS information. Now, just kind of a super high level quick overview of what that is. UDS is Universal Diagnostic System. This is a type of information sent on a bus. So this is the proprietary data, essentially, that's coming out on the bus. So it's going to show you things that are specific to your engine and your chassis. So it's going to show you the software version, the diagnostic version, hardware part numbers, software part numbers, and it's going to do that for each one of these modules. So you've got your CPC module, you got your MCM, you've got your SAM cabin. So these are all proprietary information for their specific modules to Detroit and Freightliner. Okay, so it's just basically a general overview of hardware part numbers, software part numbers, calibration IDs, VIN number, serial number, that sort of thing. So hard written information. I don't spend a whole lot of time here. So the next one we have is the standard. Now the standard is a bus that we're more familiar with as technicians. This is going to be our 1939. It's showing you the same modules, right? So we have the CPC under 1939. We have the CPC under UDS, right? But it's going to show you a little bit different information. It's going to show you unit power number, serial number, make and model. So this is specific to Detroit. Again, specific to Detroit, calibration number, identification number. And then it's going to tell you which channel it's on. So we have J1939-1 on USB link 2, so that's saying channel 1, pin C and D of our 9-pin connector. We're using a USB link 2, and we're communicating at 250K baud rate. Now, as a general rule, Most of this stuff, as technicians, you will want to see some of this, but most of the stuff you're not going to spend much time with, right? If you need to know your VIN number, it's located here, but it's also located here. If you need your engine serial number, it'll be located here, but it will also be located here. So this is just showing you the different modules and the serial numbers and the hardware part numbers and just hard written information into the modules that they are identifying. The third tab here is going to be your audit trail. The audit trail is basically just going to track anytime something is changed with a date and a timestamp. So you can see here this CPC had a parameter change on 12/6/2021 at 3:40. Tool ID 00000000. And so typically what the zeros mean is that's an aftermarket tool, is generally what that means. So for an example here, on this CPC, under Audit Trail, I can see that on 12/6 at 3:40, somebody changed a parameter. And the tool ID, since it's all zeros, tells me that that's an aftermarket tool like a Texa or a Jaw Test or a J-Pro or something like that, not the OEM. Now, if you had an OEM software, it's going to give you a tool ID located here. So customer parameters were changed on this date at this hours with an aftermarket tool. And then the password was changed at 3,671 hours with an OEM tool, Detroit Diagnostic link, on 7/27/2012. So it's actually tracking all the way back to 2012 when things were changed. So it tells you like when road speed parameters were changed, when cruise speed parameters were changed. It just tells you basically, has anybody been in here and changing anything? And so that's kind of nice just to have an audit trail if for some reason there's a value that's been changed or something that's off and the customer says, no, nobody's messed with it. Well, you can come in here and prove that somebody did or did not. Right? So we have our engine totals. Engine totals is just going to show you the total engine runtime, the total engine idle time, time since millamp's been activated, how long it's been since DTCs have been cleared, you know, just some basic information. Our rating tab here is going to tell us the rating of the engine, so the horsepower and torque ratings. And then stored data is going to be another place to access hard written information in the module. So again, part numbers, year, make, model, again, stuff that honestly you're probably not going to use much. So the reason I say that is, let's face it, most of the time whenever you're busting out software and it's time to connect to a truck or a marine engine or whatever it is that you do, basically we're doing that because we're either trying to, you know, change a parameter or check fault codes or troubleshoot or run some tests or program. So let's kind of get into those things that we'd be using a little more often. So the first tab, the most common tab that I think you'll access will be the fault code tab. So once you automatically connect and you see your identification information here, we'll click on the fault codes. Now, what it's going to do is it's going to bring up all the modules that have fault codes, and then it's going to tell you what the code number is it active, is it inactive? So let's kind of look at that. Let's start down here with motor control module. So notice we don't have any active faults here, so we'll start down here at the motor control module. So we have an EGR delta pressure sensor low. So this is telling us the description of our fault code. Okay, so if it's active, it's in red. And so it's telling us EGR delta pressure sensor circuit low. Then it's telling us our fault code. So we have 411 is the SPM, and then the 4 is how it failed. So even though it says number and mode, what this actually should say is SPN and FMI. Okay, so SPN in this column, FMI here. So 411 SPN means EGR, and then FMI 4 or failure mode stands for out of range low. Okay, now this is a confirmed active code and it's permanent. Now what that means is confirmed active means that it's an actual problem, it's active right now, and permanent means that it's an emission-related fault. So when they say permanent, they don't mean this code will be here forever. They mean that this code is going to stay in the software on the back end for 300 hours of continuous duty without the code coming back. That's basically a EPA regulation. When we went to HDOBD, anytime we had an emission-related fault, it must stay in the system for 300 engine hours. So that's what permanent means. So this is an active fault. So we have an active EGR delta pressure sensor circuit low 4114, confirmed active permanent. Now, when it tells us here traditional, troubleshooting tree, traditional, what that means is if we see a little exclamation point here, that means we can troubleshoot this fault code using the integrated troubleshooting information. If we have a red X beside it, that means that we can't. Okay, so the red X, once I click that on this code, that means there is no troubleshooting information for it. Notice that the troubleshooting fault icon down here grays out. But if I click on one of these icons that has the little exclamation point with the blue circle, notice this correlating picture down here turns black. So it's saying, hey, we have troubleshooting information for this. Now before I go to that, let me click this little expand box right here. And by clicking this expansion box, it's going to give us the UDS fault code. And again, some fault code information will use that. Most of the fault code information will use the 411.4. It's going to tell us when the fault code happened. So the first account was on 11/8/2021 at 3:34. The last time this fault code happened was on 12/9/2021 at 2:46. Right? The fault code happened at 12,021 hours was the first occurrence, and then the 1587 fault code information, or the PID and FMI, or SID and FMI if it was 1939, would be this 411.4. And then basically we have all these little boxes here that we can click that gives us more information about the occurrence counts, right? So for an example, how many times did it happen? 9. How many active seconds was it? 42,965. Engine hours of the first occurrence, engine hours of the last occurrence. What was the engine speed when it happened? 0. What was the engine torque? 0. Engine coolant temp was 70. Boost pressure was 13.9, which is actually because it's an absolute pressure sensor, so it's a little different. Vehicle speed was 0. And then as we just keep clicking these expansion boxes, it's just going to give us more and more information. Some of it's going to be good. Some of it's not going to be very useful. So again, we can just kind of come through here and see what the vehicle status was when this fault code happened, how many times it happened, and what the status of all the parameters and their actual values were at the time the fault code occurred. So once we click all those drop downs, we'll get all that information. Now, the next thing that we can do is we can troubleshoot this fault code. And the easiest way to do that with the integrated troubleshooting is to highlight the fault code in question, which is active, and then we'll come down here to this Troubleshoot Fault box, and we'll click. Now once we do that, we're going to get a description. So this fault code sets when there's an open in the voltage supply circuit or an open or short to ground on the signal wire. Monitor parameter is EGR delta pressure. Always enabled monitoring. Typical seconds that it has to be active, 2. It turns on the malfunction indicator lamp and the check engine light. It does derate the engine 25%. And then engine idle verification. How do you know that the issue's been fixed? Once you fix the engine and you let it idle for 1 minute, the code should go inactive. We scroll down. We'll get us a schematic here of what all is involved in this particular fault code. And then you'll notice they give us the EGR delta P sensor, but they also show us intake throttle. And they also show us the fuel pressure sensor, the low pressure fuel pressure sensor. Now the reason they're showing you all 3 of these, even though it's just one code related to the EGR delta pressure, is because these share reference and grounds. Okay, so you can see this is our signal wire for EGR delta pressure, and then it shows that we're sharing our signal, or not our signal, but our reference voltage and our ground. So positive, negative signal. So 5-volt reference, ground, signal. So you can see that we're sharing our reference voltage across multiple sensors. So it's basically saying, hey, just so you know, there's other sensors tied into this. And that actually gives us a really quick idea. I know this is a little bit off subject, but this is really nice. And the reason I like the way they do this is because if I'm troubleshooting a fault code, and I have a fault code for, you know, the EGR delta pressure like we do here, if I don't have codes for intake throttle and I don't have codes for fuel pressure sensor, then I know automatically that I'm getting my 5-volt reference and my ground from my module. So I know that this is coming out, because if it wasn't, then I wouldn't have it here either. So that tells me that at least these pins on the module are working. Now that doesn't tell me that I might not have a problem on this side of the splice. I very well could, but at least it's telling me from here and here to here, we're good. So it kind of gives me an idea of, you know, what's going on. Now, we can also follow our troubleshooting here. So turn the ignition switch on, check for multiple fault codes. Is fault code 3509 FMI4 present? So yes, go to that fault code. No, go to step 4, and then you just click the hyperlink. Turn the ignition off. Disconnect the sensor. Is there damage? No. Go to step 6. And then you just follow this all the way to the point where it tells you exactly what's wrong, whether you have a bad sensor or a bad wiring harness. It'll take you all the way to the failure. And then when you're finished, if you just click finish, you're done, and it takes you back out. So step-by-step troubleshooting is basically part of the software, and so it's that simple. And then we can do that with any one of these. So for an example, if I wanted to troubleshoot the quality control valve here, or quantity control valve, sorry, we'd highlight that and do the same thing. We're coming down here and troubleshoot faults, and it brings us in and tells us all about it. We follow step by step, and then when we're finished, we click finish, and all done. Now, once we've troubleshot our faults, we can clear these fault codes. So we have a few ways to do this. I'm going to see if I can show you an example. But for some reason, here we go. So one thing that's kind of neat is it doesn't do it with all of them. So notice down here it says clear fault, and it says clear all faults. One thing that's kind of neat about this software, and it doesn't work on all of them, but notice if I come down here and go a little bit lower, it gives me the option to clear an individual fault. So for an example, I could clear these not active faults. If I wanted to get rid of all these non-active faults on the screen, I could just clear them one at a time by clearing faults, or I can clear all the faults at one time. Okay, so for an example, notice we have the turn right front side not active, so I can click clear fault, and that code will clear only that fault. All right, so I can clear faults individually, or typically if you have a bunch of inactive faults and you just want to see active, you can just clear all faults, and that'll clear everything but the active fault. So I'll run that real quick. Okay, so you'll see here that I do have a DPF Zone 2 condition. So if I highlight that and I come down here to Troubleshoot Fault, it's going to take me in here and let me know that this code is information only and used to help understand which dash lights are illuminated. A stationary regen is required if the fault code is active. No action is required for an inactive fault code. All right, so that's pretty neat. Tells you all that. All right, so that's pretty much covering everything in the fault code world. Notice that when I go to the ABS wheel speed, I do have a red X, which means I don't have any troubleshooting for that. So that's because that is a non-specific Detroit module. And then last but not least, we have a Troubleshoot Symptom tab right here. The Troubleshoot Symptom tab is going to let us troubleshoot by symptom. So we come in here and we say, okay, what is our symptom? We scroll in here and we try to find what our symptom is. You know, symptom diagnostics, rod out of the block. Well, I guess that's probably pretty easy to figure out the failure there, at least the result. But let's see, if you had coolant loss, you could choose coolant loss if that was a symptom that you had. Then we can click next, and then we'll highlight the symptom that we have and click next, and then it'll take you through the troubleshooting on how to find a coolant loss. All right, so pretty neat. Again, when finished, just click finish. So that's underneath fault codes. Now, the other tabs that we have here, we have fault history. So if I click this and refresh it, it's basically going to ask me for a login to Daimler. So basically the fault history is going to be a specific unit for dealerships to see what the history is of the vehicle. And then test results, these are ECM tests. It's telling you basically each time, think of it like an OBD readiness monitor. These are tests that the ECM is constantly running, and it's looking for, you know, what the fault code is, what the values are that set it, how many times it happens. Just readiness monitors essentially is a basic way to look at it. And then virtual technician data. This is going to be used again for dealerships. so we won't have access to that either. But Detroit Connect is virtual technician data is remote diagnostics, basically. All right, so the next tab that we'll go to will be the troubleshooting tab. Looks like we are frozen here. Give me 1 second. We're having, again, another power glitch, so hold tight. All right, back at it. I apologize again. It's going to be a rough hour or so left, but we'll get through it. All right, so the next tab that we'll go to or talk about will be the troubleshooting tab, which will basically be a redundant version of this. So it'll be troubleshooting symptoms and troubleshooting faults. Instead of just selecting the code here and clicking it here or here, this is just a standalone tab. So if we click here, we can troubleshoot by symptom, we can troubleshoot by fault code, or by a previous issue from another location. So if another location had troubleshot the same issue, they can send you that recording or that issue over here so you can examine it from here. Not something we ever use, but still available. So again, if you wanted to troubleshoot symptoms or fault codes, you can do that here, but you can also do it from the fault code tab. So a little bit redundant. All right, so the next tab, the instrumentation tab, think of this as your live data tab. There's a couple different places that we can look for live data information, but this is one of them. So for an example here, we have all instruments. So all instruments will be basically everything that's monitored. That's a lot of stuff. I don't typically use that because it's, to be honest with you, it becomes overwhelming pretty quick just because of all the options and all the information that's there. So typically what I do is either choose a predetermined session or a predetermined way to view this information, or I create my own. So to show you that, if we were looking at, for an example, if you wanted to look at your EGR, right? So we can go to one of these predetermined sessions up here. So I can click on EGR, and that's going to show me all the things that relate to EGR and its live data. Now again, it's going to seem like there's a lot of stuff missing here, and that's because there kind of is, but they sprinkle this information out throughout the software in multiple places. So instrumentation is one place you can come to see live data. Again, if you wanted to choose a predetermined session up here, so we have EGR, which showed you all the EGR related things. If we click on mechanical, it'll show you mechanical related things like engine speed and actual torque load, and is your fan coming on, what your barometric pressure is, just some basic information. We have fuel system controls, we have cruise control, but again, some of this is decent, some of it's lacking. So another place we can go is user. Now user means user defined. So that means that we can choose whatever we want. So these are all lumped up versions of sessions or parameters, or we can create our own. So if we wanted to look at something specific, then we would just choose user. And then if I wanted to just look at a few things that were specific to my issue, all I would have to do is come in here and find those things. Now, we can either search, or we can just manually come in here and look. So if I wanted to see actual engine speed, I could click here. And then let's say I wanted to look at oil pressure, and I wanted to look at intake air temp. And what I want you to notice here, y'all, is they lump this up by modules. So let me non-expand these. Let me close all these down because it automatically expands them all. Some of these things will be found in some modules, some will be found in others. So right now, the first one that I chose is the common powertrain controller. Now that on a Detroit is considered a gateway, so it does show some of these parameters. But there's going to be a lot of parameters that it doesn't show, right? So for an example, we can see DPF switch status. We can see, some basic information but we can't see it all. Now, if you're looking for engine-related stuff, we'll go to the motor control. So make sure that you're going through all of these. If there's a parameter that you don't see under Common Powertrain Controller, then go under MCM. And if there's something you're missing that's not under MCM, go to ACM and go through here until you find the modules that have the information stored. So if I wanted to see DPF-related stuff, then I'd go to the After Treatment Control module. So I'd look at DOC inlet pressure and DPF outlet pressure, and DOC inlet temp, DOC outlet temp, DPF outlet temp. Now the model out delay, that's what it should be. So model out delay is what it's thinking it should be reading. DPF target temp, again, what it thinks that it should be reading. So those are kind of like commanded versus actual. But anyway, we come through here and we start just choosing all the things that we want to see. And then here's our live data list. So just a quick way to go in and look and see certain parameters and their actual values while you're operating the unit. So you can do performance sessions or low power sessions, or just look at live data for what it is. And then if there's certain live data that you use all the time, you know, if you find yourself coming in here and, well, let's clear this out and start over. So by clicking this little box here, that clears the full list back out. But let's say I found myself doing low power problems a lot. So let's say we did engine speed, we did turbo speed, and we did, let's see, commanded boost pressure, valve position, commanded versus actual, desired rail pressure, actual rail pressure, you know, just some low power problems. If you decided that you do this all the time and it's the same things that you monitor all the time, you can choose those, and then you can come up here and you can save that. So I can click save, and I can call this DD13 low power. Once I click save, and then if I ever wanted to open that up later, I can click that folder here, and then I can double click DD13 low power, and it will pull all of those back up, right? So if there's one that you use all the time, a set of parameters that you use all the time that are specific to an issue or an engine or whatever, you can go into that instrumentation, you can go into user, and then you can choose all the things you want to monitor, click the save icon, name it, and then once you save it, to open it, you just click the open folder, choose the XML file, and there it goes. So quick and easy way to perform diagnostics. All right, so another place that is very common for us to see live data, believe it or not, is service routines. So service routines is a little bit different, but I say it's different because service routines is where we can go to actually perform service routines like running a regeneration, a low temp regeneration, a normal regeneration, an SCR performance test. Those are considered service routines. And when you run a service routine, it actually shows you the live data as well as you run that routine. So if we just want to see live data, we can come in here and, again, use predetermined sessions or create your own, or we can search. So we can type in intake, and it'll search everything with intake located here, or you can type in, you know, mass air or whatever it is you're looking for. So we can search again, and remember, we can save and reload those. But we can also go to service routines. So when I go to service routines is where I'm going to do a lot of my testing, right? And so one thing that I haven't really showed y'all yet is something that I think is very, very important on this software. It's something that's very helpful. And so what that would be is, for example, we have perform parked regeneration. So we're in here, we chose service routines. Here's all the service routines we can run, or the type of service routine. So here we have selected DPF system. Well, under DPF system are going to be a lot of different DPF related tests, like a parked regeneration, or a perform performance check, or a purge hydrocarbon doser, or request driving regeneration. But if I wanted to run a normal parked regeneration, I would just go into service routines, I would choose DPF system, and then I would choose perform parked regeneration, and then I would just click start when the engine's hot. So it's going to tell me here, perform parked regeneration procedure cannot start. Engine speed is not valid, and that's why it doesn't give me a start function here. So again, one of the things that I haven't showed you is, well, what are some of these things? Well, if there's anything on the screen that you're confused about, or you don't understand, or you want more information about, it'll be pretty straightforward. All we have to do is come up here to the help icon and click help. Now when we click help, we can either look for generalized help, or we can look for help for the specific screen that we're in, or the specific view that we're in. So to do that, I will just click help for this view. So when I click help for this view, it'll tell us here, the DPF system tab enables users to perform a parked regeneration, monitor the values, stop the process for any reason, purge the hydrocarbon doser, request a driving regeneration. So it tells me all the stuff that can be done, and then gives me an example of what that looks like. So if you're ever curious about what any of this stuff does, we can locate that pretty quick by clicking help for this view. So just help for this view, and then it brings that information up for us here. If the information that you're looking for isn't in here, then we also have a keyword search that we can use. So let's type in low temp. Okay, so notice that we have a performance check, low temp, ATD, so after treatment regeneration. Well, what is that? Okay, what is a low temp regeneration? Well, if you didn't know, we just, again, help for this view, but it didn't show that. It doesn't show the low temp in here for some reason. So since it doesn't show low temp, we'll search it, and then it'll show us performance check, low temperature. So we'll double click that, and then it shows us that the low temperature after treatment service routine was developed to help diagnose after treatment issues. This routine will help with diagnosing NOx sensor drift issues. So this is a really nice test. If you're not sure if your NOx sensors are good, one of the easiest ways to tell, and we learned this in the after treatment class that we have at Diesel Laptops. So if you haven't been to any of our in-person training, I would highly recommend it, especially if you have questions regarding after treatment or electrical or oscilloscopes or data bus or any of those things. We'd love to have you. But here, basically what this test is for, and it's really nice, it allows you to run a regeneration, but it's not a normal regeneration. Basically what this test is designed to really help you with is to test your NOx sensors. And so how does it do that? Well, it tells you that you have to disconnect your def doser. So it's very specific in that. Most people forget that step. But you're going to want to disconnect your def doser. And then once you disconnect your def doser and you run a low temperature regeneration, it basically runs a regeneration without ever dosing not only def, but hydrocarbons. In other words, your after treatment fuel injector won't dose either. And so what that allows you to do is get a stabilized exhaust reading. And since your def doser is not dosing, then your inlet NOx and your outlet NOx should be within 50 part per million of each other. And if they are within 50 part per million of each other, then that tells you that your NOx sensors are in fact good. So it will tell you all of this. It tells you how long it takes to get hot. It tells you that you should compare your inlet and outlet NOx values. They should read within 10% of each other. If they are within 10% of each other, then the NOx sensors are reading correctly. So just something to think about. And pretty neat, man. Pretty neat to have that information there. So if you want to run a test and you don't know what it means, come up here and hit that help icon. I use help all the time. If there's something that I'm new with or don't understand, I'll click that help in a minute. So then we have SCR system. So we can click on the SCR system, and this will do a perform output component test or perform SCR parked efficiency. So again, if we don't know what that is, click on that efficiency test, help for this view, and then it's going to tell us all the things that we have. Click efficiency test, and it tells us exactly what that efficiency test is. So one thing that I really like about the Detroit software is there's really no guessing. Everything's kind of out in front. Then again, we have all of our live data represented here. Now, another place that I noticed that things are a little kind of back and forth is there's multiple places to do multiple things. Like, for an example, we went to instrumentation and we could see live data. Well, you go to service routines and you can see live data. Well, also under service routines, we can do a intake throttle valve test, but there's other places we can go to do tests like that. So when I click on intake throttle valve, it allows me to start a test. Let's click help for this view, and let's see what needs to happen in order for this test to run. So you can use to manually open or close the intake valve. To run the intake valve service routine, press start, press positive or negative for 10% increases, full closed or full open. Okay, so let's run that test. We will go to start, and then I'm going to go to full close. And so it says that my actual throttle valve position is 100. So 100% is done. We'll go full open, and it goes back. So that shows me that my intake throttle valve is actuating correctly. All right, cylinder cutout. Now, if we click on cylinder cutout, that's going to allow us to cut out different cylinders. It's going to allow us to see the engine speed and the change that it makes on engine speed. And then not only that, but we can turn all cylinders off one by one. This test does let you run more than 2 at a time, which is good. And then not only that, but I can turn off multiple cylinders to check for my cylinder balance, but I can also do it at different RPMs with a max of 1,000. So anytime you do cylinder cutouts, it's never a bad idea to do it at, idle and then an increased RPM. So this allows you to do that at essentially at idle, and then allows you to do that at 1,000 RPM. So pretty nice feature for the cutout test. And then up here at top, we do have a graph layout of what it will look like in a graphical view when we're running that cylinder cutout. So we'll be able to see a graphical view of that test taking place. Low pressure leak test allows you to see if you have a very high fuel compensation pressure. Just another test. If you want to know more about it, click help. I'll tell you all about it. And then last but not least, we have voltages here. So the voltages is another place to look at live data. Like I said, you're going to see there's multiple places to do a lot of the same things. So there is a bit of redundancy here. So if you go to instrumentation and you don't see some data that you want to see, don't forget their service routines. And if you go to service routines and there's some tests that you don't see here that you want to run, don't forget that we have actions up here. So actions is another place to do testing. So a lot of redundancy, a lot of things that are very similar in different places. But anyway, if I go here and I look at our voltages, you'll notice that our voltages aren't reading. So if you're like me and you do a lot of electrical troubleshooting and you need to see these voltages, well, what we need to do is it's telling us, see that play button, it's telling us we need to start requiring or acquiring this data. To do that, we come down here to start acquiring. When I click that, then all my voltages will start reading. So just make sure you're clicking that start acquiring function here. And then whenever I'm finished reading the data that I'm reading, I can come here and click stop acquiring. All right, so next we have input and output control. Now input and output control is going to be another way that we can turn things on or turn things off. But input-output controls can either be pin numbers that we're turning on or off. So you'll see here that we have an analog by pin, so we can actually turn whatever these pins control on or off. And those are typically going to be body-related pins or chassis-related or, something that the bodybuilder would use for the CPC. And then the things that are specific to the vehicle, for an example, the oil pressure lamp or coolant temp lamp or oil pressure gauge, coolant temp gauge, speedometer. If let's say the customer says, hey, my coolant temp gauge doesn't work, well, you can click on coolant temp gauge, and then you can change the value. You can set the duration for however long you want to do it, and then it'll tell you that value on the gauge or if the gauge is working. So a couple different ways to test stoplights or gauge operation, things like that. So like let's say the customer comes in and says, hey, my regeneration light doesn't work. Okay, well, if you come in here to input and output control and you go to the DPF regeneration lamp to prove that that lamp does or doesn't work, all we have to do is click the on, and then on will turn that lamp on. and then we can click off to turn it back off. Give me 1 second, y'all. We're getting another little bit of a power flicker here, so give me a second. All right, back at it. Okay, so input and outputs are just places that you can turn things on or off. They're typically related to pin function or lights. Lamps and switches, if you wanted to come here and, again, another place to turn, because you notice if we come here to activate outputs, we had lamps, oil pressure lamp, coolant temperature lamp, wait to start lamp. Well, if we go to lamps and switches, guess what we got? Stop engine lamp, malfunction indicator lamp. Like it's very redundant. But the same thing happens in here. You can click it, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, stop all. And then this also gives you a place to look at all of your switches, like, for an example, your clutch switch. Is your clutch switch working? Is your clutch switch changing when you hit the switch? Does the DPF switch actually read when you flip the switch on? Does it actually, you know, is the ECM actually reading that switch? So input and output controls is a place that you can go to come in here and monitor live values of switch positions. So this will be good for if you had cruise control problems, or clutch switch starting issues, or anything that requires an on-off switch, cruise control on, cruise control off, cruise control zoom, engine brake switches. You can just come in here and see if when you hit the switch, does it actually see the switch change. So we'll let this read up. All right, so the next tab that we came to is going to be the Parameters tab. So the Parameters tab is where we're going to go to essentially change adjustable parameters, right? So if you had to change cruise control or PTO speeds or idle shutdowns, or whatever settings your customer wants to change, we can come in here and do that. Now, just like we saw previously, it does it by different modules. So all these are automatically expanded, but there's a lot of different modules in here. So if you don't see something you think should be in this module, just make sure you're checking all of them. Make sure that you don't give up and say, oh, well, it doesn't have that. Remember, this is the OM software, so if it's an option to change, it should be in here. So for an example, let's say we wanted to change road speed and cruise. The thing that we can do is we can either choose through this list. Notice we're on all parameters, so this is every parameter that's available. But if we're doing something specific like road speed and cruise, well, why don't we go to speed limiter and cruise control? And so what these will do is these will lump together those specific functions, so they're easier to find all the things that relate to that. So here we have speed limiter. So if I click on speed limiter, it'll bring up all the things that are related to speed limiter. So here we have max road speed, we have absolute max vehicle speed. We have a lot of different options that we can choose from. Again, if you're not sure what that is, we can highlight that. We can click information. And then what that'll do is when we click the information tab down here, it's going to tell us what it's for. It's going to tell us what the max limits are. So for example, again, to show you that, if I didn't know what absolute max speed was, I can highlight it, click information. So vehicle speed limit parameters, you can go between 6 and 95 miles an hour. The default is 62 miles an hour. Access level shows all three levels can access it. So basically customers, fleets, and dealers. And then absolute max speed is specified. No features can allow this speed to be exceeding, including fuel economy incentive, common driver rewards, pass smart. So here's what that means. For an example, if you continue to read on this, Max speed means we can't exceed this mile per hour. Absolute max speed means, let's say we have a driver's reward system where your max vehicle speed was 49 miles an hour, like you see here, but if your driver was to get 6.5 miles a gallon for 200 miles, then we give them the option, hey, you can actually get an incentive. We're going to give you an extra 5 miles an hour. Well, if I set this absolute max speed to, say, 51, well, even if the driver's reward says give me an extra 5, it won't, because this is the fastest this truck can absolutely go, regardless of driver incentive, regardless of overrides, of anything. Okay, so again, a lot of these parameters can be confusing because there's just so many that have like weird descriptions, like limiter, minimum engine speed enabled, 500 RPM. So we go to information, and then we read up on what exactly that limiter is. So we may have to scroll and find it, or maybe not a quick thing, but all the information will be located in that document. But if I wanted to change the value, let's say I wanted to change my road speed value, all I have to do is highlight the box that I want to change, and then I'm going to enter in my value. So I'll say I want to go 55 miles per hour. Now, don't worry, it's very normal whenever you type in a new value, and I personally don't know the algorithm or why it does this, but I put in 55 miles an hour, and it gave me 54.93. Now, this will go 55 miles an hour, but the values are never exact, right? So absolute max speed, let's say my absolute max speed, I want 75. If I type in 75, notice it says 75.06. I don't know where it gets that formula from, but just type in the number that you're looking for. And then once you change the value to whatever value it is that you want, all we have to do is come down here and click the Send button. Once I do that, it's going to show me all the parameters that I've got listed here that I want to change, the full complete list. And what I typically do here is print this out. So if you have a customer that, says, hey, I want my road speed and cruise speed changed, I want my PTO speed changed, all of these things, I usually, once I do that, I print this out to hand it to them to say, here's what the value was, or what the value is, here's what the original value was, so they can see what you changed. Once you click OK, it's going to go ahead and write those parameters, and when it's finished, it will tell you that parameter is safe. Okay, so it says here that parameters were successfully written to the device, so those parameters were successfully changed. Simple as that, all right? And then, of course, we have just more options up here that we can go with. And then we can compare parameters, fuel economy parameters, speed limiter parameters, cruise control parameters. So again, if I wanted to change my cruise, I do the same thing. If you're curious about what any of these cruise values are, adaptive cruise control mode selection, manual cruise enable, what is any of this, highlight that parameter, and then remember to click that information box, and it'll pop up the information telling you what all that is. Because again, as a dealer tech, I want to tell you, make sure you're using help for this view, make sure you're using help for information here, because a lot of this stuff just doesn't make sense when you read it. If you just read it out loud. I mean, S cruise engine RET 3 on thresh speed, right? So you're like, I don't know what that means. Just select it, highlight it, make sure you read about it. But that's how we use parameters, or how we change parameters. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Coming up here, let's talk about this before. I can't program a device, but I can show you how to get in there to program it. But we'll save that for the end there. Let me show you a few other things before we get there. So up here we have some other options here. So we have the File tab, Open Log. That's going to let us open up a log file. I'll show you that. One thing that's kind of neat about Detroit Diagnostic Link is the second I open up the software and the second I connect to the truck, it's recording. Okay, so this whole time we've been connected, this whole time I've been clicking on stuff and looking at stuff and changing parameters, we've been recording all of that. While I'm looking at the live data, it's recording all of that. So when I'm finished and I exit out, I will have a log that's been created, and I can go back and view that. It's a drum roll file, and we'll show you what that looks like shortly. But it basically looks like you're connected again. It looks like it does right now, but we'll show you that here in a little bit. Recent files shows the recent drum rolls that you've done, the recent logs that you've looked at. Close connections will close out the connection here, or disconnect you. Connect will reconnect you. Here's all our hot icons in the edit function. Let's go to some things that we'll be using. So like parameter import and export, for an example. If you wanted to, let's say you had two sister trucks, and let's say you wanted to pull all the parameters off of one truck and load it into the other truck just to make sure they both match identical. All you have to do is export the parameters. So if I wanted to export my parameters for the CPC, I will choose the CPC, and then basically what you can do is select all. We'll click export, and then that's going to put it under user data parameters. So user data parameters. So just need to make sure we're in the right file path. So C drive, program data, Detroit diesel, drum roll, user data parameters. All right, and I'll name this testing 1214. Save. Okay, and then if I wanted to put those parameters in this module, I can go to import parameters, and I can do a file import. I can choose the one, and it's basically saying, hey, there's no parameters that are different. I can load it in here, but there's nothing here to change, right? But if there were differences, then when I choose that, it will tell me OK, and then it'll give me the option to transfer those parameters in. All right, so but nothing changed. There was nothing different. So basically what happened is it brings you back to the parameters tab, and then you click send. So again, to take parameters out of a vehicle and transfer them into another one, we just do export. We choose the module. Once we choose the module, you either select the specific parameters you want to change, or you select them all. You export them. I'll just save it under that one again. And then when you're ready to transfer them into the new module, you connect this software to the second truck, or to the truck you want to put them into. You go to parameters, you go to import, file import, choose your list, and then it'll pop up the values here, and then all you'll do is click send. Now again, it doesn't say send because nothing's changed. It's all the same. There's nothing to change. So that's how we import and export parameters. So pretty straightforward and easy. So actions. Actions is another place. We keep talking about other place, because it's another place where we can do testing. So remember, service routines, we could do regenerations, we could do SCR performance tests, we could do low temp regeneration, we could do cylinder cutouts. Well, actions takes us to another place. So for an example, we have after treatment. We can run a DEF coolant control valve test. So basically the DEF tank heater. We can test the DEF tank heater to make sure it's turning on and off. We can test our DEF quantity. So we can remove our doser, our DEF doser, and make sure that we're getting the correct quantity coming out of that doser. We can run a DOC face plug cleaning. Basically what this is since the Detroit one box consists of 2 DOCs, 2 DPFs, and 2 SCR catalysts, all contained inside the same single box canister. The only thing that's serviceable in that is going to be the DPFs. So the way Detroit does it is the DOCs and the SCR catalysts are both all welded together, so they're theoretically not serviceable, but the DPFs can be. So they came out with what they call a DOC face plug cleaning, which is going to allow you to run a regeneration that's a lower temp than normal, and the thought behind that is to go ahead and decarbon or desoot the face of the DOC. It does work decent. It's not amazing, so if it's very, very, very heavily face plugged, then it's probably not going to work. We can do a DPF ash accumulator. So if you are removing and replacing or removing and cleaning your DPF, you will have to reset your ash accumulator. We have the metering unit flood routine. So the flow test of the metering unit. We also have SCR system pressure check to make sure your system can hold adequate pressure, the air pressure side of the SCR system, and then if you do an SCR replacement. Then we have EGR. So if you need to do a delta pressure sensor recalibration, or you need to do a EGR low flow test, or an actuator slow learn, you can perform those here. Again, if you're not sure what any of these are, the help file looks a little bit different. So if I click EGR actuator slow learn, for an example, and I didn't know what this does, I'll click the help file, which in this case will now be a little question mark. So notice we have the help file here, we have the help file here, and then sometimes we have the help file here. So if I click that little question mark right there, it will tell me what this test is for, right? So it's used to locate the end stops for the EGR valve. So when you replace the EGR valve, they're telling you to do this so it learns its start and stop positions. So that's under EGR, and then of course we have fleet management, which we have trip data. If you wanted to view, clear, and print your trip data, we can click that here. So that gives us the opportunity to see our trip information. Now, one thing that is a little weird here, you have the DDEC data pages, but the best way to do a DDEC report is to actually download a free DDEC software. Let's see if I can find it really quick. I don't remember. It was called, you can download it for free and make sure it's not on the screen. So yep, if you want to do a DDEC report, some customers do ask for a DDEC report because DDEC reports give you, engine usage reports, diagnostic records, fault code records, idle time records, trip data, fuel economy, that sort of thing. It's kind of an overall view. It's kind of like a fault, or not a fault code analyzer, but a regeneration analyzer, or a Cummins has another term for that. I forget the name of it, but it's basically an overall view of the health of the vehicle. But if you want to run a DDEC report, the best thing to do is come down in here and download the software. So you can get DDEC for free, DDEC reports for free. So just Google DDEC reports, and it'll give you the free download. So DDEC reports 8.0. So if you want to pull a DDEC report, just download that software. I'll just run it in the background if it'll let me. All right, so from their main page, DDEC reports over here. Here's the download. So we'll go ahead and download that. They say you can do it through the DL8 software, but it doesn't work right. It doesn't work well. So the best way to do is just go to the Daimler website, download DDEC reports. And while that's downloading, we'll let that process in the back. So I'll show you that. Fuel system checks. So we have our fuel system integrity check. We have our pressure limiting valve check. Again, if you don't know what that means, be sure to click the help icon. From the actions, we can also do a VIN synchronization to make sure all our modules have the same VIN number. It's very common for customers to take known good modules out of trucks and put them into other trucks, sister trucks, so we can sync the VIN numbers for all those here. You can change your idle shutdown values here. If you do injector codes, so let's say you replace an injector on a Detroit engine and you need to install the new trim file, we'll go to actions and then we'll go to injector codes. Now, Basically what will end up happening is if I end up replacing a injector or a set of injectors, I have to program my ECM on my Detroit to recognize that change. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come down here and I'll click read, and that's going to pull up all the trim files that are currently in the vehicle. And then what I'll do if I want to install a new injector, I'm going to type in the part number here. Now, one thing that I think you should be aware of is anytime that you're doing an injector change on a Detroit, you do have to program these trim files, which is the injector code. But the other thing is they ask you for a part number. So they're going to ask you for the injector part number, which is here. And then once you type in the injector part number, it's going to tell us, hey, what's your injector code? Now, the injector code and the part number will both be stamped on the injector, but the injector part number is going to be a remanufactured injector part number. You're going to want the original part number of the vehicle. So whatever the original part number was of the injectors in the truck, that's what you're going to type here. So again, if you are working on a vehicle that's already had injectors replaced and it's reman part numbers, the best way to do that would be when you call the parts department and say, hey, I need a set of injectors for this truck, just ask them what the original part number for the vehicle was, and you'll type in the original part number located here, and then type in your injector code. And then when you're done, you just click write, and that will write the new calibration codes to the module. So remember, your part number needs to be the original part number that the truck was built with. I know that's a little weird, but you're going to have problems if you don't use that number. And then, of course, you'll need that injector code off of that injector. All right. If you have any predictive cruise control diagnostics, if you have, forward radar or wingman or anything that's up front, you'll use the predictive cruise control diagnostics. The rating is kind of a neat thing. It allows you to select between different horsepower ranges, but this is only if the vehicle was built with that option. So for an example, it says that I can switch between 434, 434, 434, 1800, 1800, and 1800. All those are the same. So when this vehicle was built, there was not a rating change. So with Detroit, you can actually buy the truck and say, hey, I want my truck to have multiple horsepower ranges. And you can do that. So let's say you have a truck that, when you add that, let's say your line haul, it's a line haul truck, and you're going to be pulling mountains a lot. Well, then you put it on the high power selection, which could be maybe 500 horse. And then let's say that truck no longer pulls the mountains. Let's say that truck's now flat ground. Well, then they don't need 500 horsepower, so you can come in here and put it on the low power setting. Or, again, the truck has to be built with that parameter changes or those settings, those options. But if it's built with that, you can actually come in here and quickly change the horsepower. So it's pretty neat if it's built with it. Real-time clock, that's going to be your SART clock or your clock that keeps track of your fault code timestamps. So you want to always make sure that your real-time clock is as accurate as it can be in terms of date and time. And this is where you can do it. So you can set it to a custom time or you can match it to your PC time. But you want to make sure your real-time clock is on time, pun intended, right? Relative compression test. If you wanted to run a relative compression test, we can do that by clicking the icon located here. Now that will tell us if we have any cylinders that are not contributing as equal as the others. And then we can also set an engine serial number and a VIN number located here. So we can sync, if we had to swap an engine, we can do a engine serial number and VIN number sync right here. All right, let's see. All right, so let's just take it into the program device. Now, unfortunately, I can't program today. There's a few reasons why I can't. Number one, just so y'all know, anytime you update or calibrate a blank module or even just update a module, there is a fee associated with that. So Detroit, unlike other manufacturers, they charge $199. So if you need to buy or update or program an ECM, the lowest amount that you could possibly be charged is $199. It's likely going to be more than that because the cost is $199. So for an example, if you purchased a programming event from, say, us or another third-party company, it's likely going to be more expensive than $200 because we have to call in, we have to get that programming event, we have to pay for that programming event, and then we have to sell that programming event to you. So typically the cost of a programming event is not $199 by the time it gets to you. It's typically a little more expensive than that, again, because the cost is $199. So that's not a it's not a super fair way to do things, but that's how Detroit does things. So if you have to program, you have to purchase that event before you can even do so. And since my computer, I do not currently have any available events, it will not let me program. It won't even let me pretend like I'm going to. But basically, here's what ends up happening. If you need to update or program an ECM, the way that you do it is we come up here. I will remove this data. All right, so it should have removed that, but it didn't for whatever reason. So let me go back out of here and go back in and see if I can get it gone. And it won't. So basically, when it's time to program, what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to go to Unit Data Management. We're going to click that. Now what that's going to do is that's going to grab the VIN number that we have, and it's going to say, oh, this is the VIN number that you want to program, is it? You're going to highlight that, and then you're going to add the request. Now, what are you trying to program? That's what you have to choose. Am I programming a CPC? Am I doing an MCM? Am I doing a SAM? Am I doing a central gateway or a modular switch field or an ACM? What am I trying to program? Now, once I choose the module that I want to program, I want to make sure that this is my correct VIN number, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, once I've added the request, now what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to connect to the server. So I have the request ready. I've chosen what I want to program, and now I highlight that, and I go down here to Connect to Server. Now, once I click Connect to Server, it's going to ask me for my username and login, which is going to allow me to connect to Freightliner server. And then once I do that, if I am accepted to program, I'll get a green check mark right here. I'll highlight that module, and then I'll come down here to Program. Now, unfortunately, it's not giving me access because I don't have any program capability right now. So again, all we have to do is if you wanted to update it, we're going to click on Connected Unit. So that's going to bring up the unit. So here's my VIN number. I select the VIN number, download data from server. It connects to server. It downloads the data. Highlight, and then program. But unfortunately, I can't do that because I don't have any programming events because they're $200. So that's the programming task. It's pretty straightforward. It's literally choose the data management, connect to the server, program. So it's going to pull all that information off of the server. Okay, let's I'll close my connections. Now I'm going to open up a log. So I'm going to go to Open Log. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a log file that is appropriately sized. Now if you notice here, we're going to want a big log file. So if our log file is very, very small, then it's not going to have much data in it. All right. So I'm going to go to this 1 megabyte here. And then when I highlight that and I click OK, that's going to open up my drum roll log. So now once it does that, notice up here it tells you offline, shows you the VIN number, and it shows you the date. Now you'll notice up here, if I click on fault codes or troubleshooting or whatever, there's not much going on until I click play. Now once I click the play button right here, now it's taking me through my actual session. All right. So let me explain that to you again. If we're doing a log file, once you use Detroit Diagnostic Link and you connect, it's going to automatically follow whatever you do, and it's going to automatically record all of that. So all we have to do is come up to File, click Open Log, and then choose the log file that we want to view based off whatever VIN number you're connected to. So let's find a different VIN number. Let's look at one that we didn't look at today. Let's do this one from 1129. Now again, once you open up that log file, everything's just here, but nothing's happening until I click play. Now once I click play, it's going to actually show me just like I was connected all over again. It's like I'm really there. So let's see what this VIN number had going on. It was a 2020 Freightliner Cascadia day cab. Just going to fast forward and see what all is on here, but it doesn't look like there's much in here. That or it's freezing up on me again. It's trying. It's populating my modules. Okay, doesn't look like there's any fault codes, so let's try a different one. I want to see if I can find one that's got some information in it that's not from today. All right, so here we go. I've got a different VIN number here. This is off a 2011 Freightliner, so this is a vehicle that we connected to on 10/7/2021. And then you can see here that we have all of our fault codes, and this is what's really neat is I'm not connected to this truck. This is from 10/7, completely different VIN number, but I can come in and see what fault codes are in there. And then I can go through just like I was actually connected to the vehicle. So I can click on my DPF outlet pressure sensor circuit fault, and I can troubleshoot that fault. I can look at my live data or my instrumentation. So whatever that vehicle was doing is being recorded. So all of this is live from that actual session. Going to service routines. Let's see, DPF system. So you can see that this vehicle was exhaust was hot. We'll fast forward a little bit. Try to figure out what was happening here. So it looks like right now, yep, vehicle was just sitting there basically, and we were scanning it. So pretty neat. All right, so that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to show you today. We're sorry for the responding, not responding, intermittent issues. Do y'all have any questions on anything that you wanted to talk about real quick? And while y'all are thinking about that, I was going to see if I can get that DDEC pages going so you can see what that looks like. So while I'm waiting on y'all to throw any questions on that chat box, I'm going to download this software and show you what the DDEC pages looks like. So as we're setting this up, you'll notice that the DDEC reports that I was going to show you is showing you how do you want to do it. Do you want to reset data or not reset data? So if you are a DDC service location, we encourage you to select no data reset. So basically what happens is when it does a data extraction and we do a DDEC report, do you want us to automatically clear the information once we pull it or not? So that's why they're telling you don't do a report there. So here's our DDEC report icon. That's what that looks like now. So I'm going to exit out of this. I'll open up the DDEC reports here. Again, this software is free. So we'll have to go to Tools, and we're going to have to make sure that we are able to connect. Oh, it's already seen it. Okay. So we don't have to connect because it's already there. So Do you want to reset the time and the trip? Yes. And then when we're ready to start the extraction, we just click Start Extraction. But I feel as if I'm frozen again, and I am. But that's moving. What ends up happening, y'all, is we're getting like power surges or flickers. So when something flicks, everything like freezes temporarily. I'm kind of surprised we've gotten through as much as we have. But it looks like everything locks up. So let's try it again. All right, so looks like we're having a bunch of issues here between the power surges and the dedecker page not working. Do y'all have any questions on Detroit Diagnostic Link that I can go over before we go ahead and close up shop? Anything that you want to see or talk about or go over? If you want to, just send it over on that chat function. Hopefully this got you acclimated to the software and where to find things and what's what. All right, well, I appreciate y'all swinging in today. I hope you learned something, and keep us in mind for any other trainings. I apologize for the power surging today. Unfortunately, there's just not much we can do about it, but reach out to us. Hopefully, we'll get this squared away. The local power company will get us fixed up, and we won't have these issues. But hopefully you learned something today in spite of all that, and we appreciate you for choosing Diesel Laptops, and we hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.